There is a question that almost every non-Muslim has at some point asked about Islam.
What does Islam say happens to me after I die?
The answer most non-Muslims have heard goes like this: you are not Muslim, so you go to hell.
That answer is wrong.
Not because it is too harsh, because it leaves out most of the actual theology.
Islamic scholars have been debating this question for 14 centuries.
They produced a careful, specific answer with multiple categories, multiple conditions, and multiple outcomes. Most people on both sides of this conversation have never heard any of it. There are 4 categories. By the end, you will know which one applies to you. Category 1 is the person who heard Islam clearly and rejected it. Most people assume this category covers every non-Muslim alive. It does not, but it exists, and the ruling is clear. If a person received the message of Islam in a sound, accurate, well-presented way, understood what it was saying, and chose to reject it, then according to scholars across all 4 major schools of Islamic law, that person is accountable for that choice. The Quran says this directly. The person who hears the truth, recognizes it, and turns away has made a decision that carries weight. But look at the conditions carefully. Sound, accurate, well-presented, genuinely understood. Not just heard the word somewhere. Not just saw a headline attached to a news story about a conflict you had no part in. Not just met a Muslim once at work and overheard something in passing without ever asking a question. If that description fits the sum total of your exposure to Islam, you have not received the message. You have received noise around the message. And those are not the same thing. Imam al-Ghazali, writing in 11th century Baghdad, argued that a person who only ever encountered Islam through stories of conquests and caricatures of the Prophet had not received the message in a sound and well-presented way. That person falls into category 2 entirely, not category 1. Category 2 is the person who never received the message or received only a distorted version. Imagine you grew up in a rural community with no Muslim neighbors, no Islamic institution within driving distance, and every time the word Islam appeared in the news, it was attached to a bombing or a conflict. You never sat across from a Muslim and asked what they actually believed. You never read a translation of the Quran. You absorbed an image of something, but you never received the message itself. That is not category 1. Islamic theology has a specific name for your situation. The al-Fatra, translated roughly as the people of the interval, people who lived in a time or place where the authentic message of a prophet never reached them in an uncorrupted form. The Quran addresses this directly in Surah Al-Isra, verse 15. Allah does not punish a people until He sends them a messenger. Accountability requires the message first arriving in an accurate form. If it did not reach you that way, the condition for accountability has not been met. Al-Ghazali was specific about who this covers. Not just remote communities before the age of communication. He wrote that many people in his own era, and by extension in any era, who only encountered Islam through distorted images and hostile accounts, had not received it in a sound way. They were in the al-Fatra. Think about what you actually know about Islam and where it came from. Not what you are reading right now, what you knew before this video. If the answer is news coverage, cultural assumptions, and second-hand accounts, then Al-Ghazali, writing 900 years ago, would say you have not received the message in the form that creates accountability. But here is what that actually means for you. It does not mean you are off the hook for everything. It means the specific accountability of hearing the truth clearly and turning away from it has not been triggered. Allah judges you on what reached you, not on what existed somewhere on earth while you were alive. What happens to people in this category? The majority position among Islamic scholars across the tradition is that their case rests with Allah, and Allah does not do injustice even as much as an atom's weight. That is Surah An-Nisa, verse 40. There is a hadith recorded by Imam Ahmad and authenticated by Al-Albani, describing 4 people who will dispute before Allah on the Day of Judgment: a deaf man who never heard the call, an insane man who could not reason, a very old man who lost the ability to understand, and a man who died in a period when no prophet's message had reached him. Each one makes their case before Allah. The hadith says they will be tested. The scholars disagreed sharply about the nature of that test. Ibn Abd al-Barr, the Andalusian judge and hadith scholar who died in 1070, rejected the specific test described in some versions of the hadith as not widely transmitted enough to establish a major theological principle. He argued the afterlife is not a place for deeds, but for reward and punishment. So how could Allah ask someone to perform an action to prove belief after death? Others said, we leave the specifics entirely to Allah and move on. Ibn Abbas, the Prophet's own cousin and one of the most respected scholars among the companions, said, it is not fitting for any person to pass judgment on how Allah rules over his creation. But across all that disagreement, one thing held. These people are not automatically condemned. Their fate rests with Allah. The Prophet described this way. He once pointed to a woman who had found her lost child and was holding him to her chest. He asked his companions whether they thought that mother could throw her child into a fire. They said no. He said, Allah is more compassionate toward his servants than she is toward that child. That is the frame in which the fate of the al-Fatra sits. Category 3 is the people of the book. This covers Christians and Jews specifically, and it is the most complex of the four. The Quran addresses them as a distinct group, not as people who received nothing, but as communities who received genuine revelation through real prophets. Muslims believe the Torah given to Musa was the word of Allah. Muslims believe the Injil given to Isa, Jesus, was the word of Allah. What sits in the current Bible is a mixture of original teaching and centuries of human addition and alteration. The Islamic term for this process of change is tahrif. So a Christian or Jew reading their scripture today is reading something that contains genuine divine truth alongside material that human hands changed over time. That creates a different starting point than someone who never received any revelation at all. But the scholars split on what this means for accountability after the coming of the Prophet Muhammad. Some held that his arrival superseded all previous revelations, and every person on earth became accountable to follow him, regardless of what they knew. Others drew distinctions based on how accurately his message reached any given individual. What every scholar agreed on: no human being has the right to declare the eternal fate of any specific Christian or Jewish person. Only Allah knows what sits in someone's heart, what access they truly had to uncorrupted truth, and how they responded to it. The Quran makes this point in Surah Al-Qasas with a detail that stops you. Allah tells the Prophet directly that he cannot guide whoever he likes. Only Allah guides whoever he wills. Think about what that means for your own situation. The Prophet spent his entire life trying to reach his uncle, Abu Talib, the man who raised him, sheltered him, defended him for decades. Abu Talib never said the testimony of faith, and the Prophet could not change that. The decision was not his to make. If the Prophet himself had no authority over that outcome, then no Muslim you have ever met, no scholar alive today, and no YouTube channel has authority over yours either. Category 4 is the person who heard Islam, recognized it as true, and accepted it. This category is the flip side of Category 1, and it almost never gets mentioned in this conversation. Islamic theology does not say that only people born into Muslim families enter Jannah. The door opens for anyone who comes to it. The Quran and the Hadith record people from every background who heard the message, found it true, and entered. And the scholars went further. A person whose legal identity in this world is Christian or Jewish, but who is a sincere monotheist, who never received the message of Islam in an accurate form, may well be among the people of Jannah. Dr. Jonathan Brown from Yaqeen Institute wrote that such a person, a true monotheist who simply never heard the message, is someone Allah may well reward with a place in the garden. This follows directly from the foundational principle: Allah does not punish until he sends a messenger.
A sincere person who worshipped one Allah as best they understood and never received a clear and accurate call to something more specific did not fail a test they were never given. But what this also means is that the door is not closed while you are alive. If you are watching this video right now, you are in the process of receiving the message in a way that is more accurate than whatever you knew before clicking on it. What you do with that is between you and Allah. If you are finding this useful, hit subscribe. This channel covers Islamic teachings and world religion content every week. 4 categories. Here is where each one lands. You heard Islam clearly, understood it, and rejected it. You are accountable. That is consistent across every major school of Islamic law. You never received the message, or only received a version shaped by conflict coverage and cultural caricature. You are in the al-Fatra. Your case is with Allah. The majority of scholars say you will not be punished for something that never reached you in a sound form. You are from the people of the book, carrying what remains of a genuine revelation through Musa or Isa. Your situation is the most contested in the tradition. No scholar of any standing claimed the right to declare your individual fate. You heard Islam, found it true, and accepted it. You stand where any Muslim stands. What runs through all 4 is the same thing. Allah is just, Allah is merciful, and no human being, not a scholar, not a preacher, not a family member, not a stranger on the internet, has enough knowledge of your heart, your access to truth, and your standing before Allah to declare where you end up. But Allah does, and the tradition is clear on what He does with that knowledge. He weighs it with justice and with mercy that exceeds anything a human court has ever produced. Ibn Abbas said it in one sentence: "It is not fitting for anyone to pass judgment on how Allah rules over His creation, nor to assign them to the garden or the fire." 14 centuries of Islamic scholarship on this question arrived at the same place that sentence points toward: humility about what humans cannot know, and trust in Allah, whose mercy the Prophet described as greater than a mother's love for her child. But there is one thing you can know with certainty from all of this. You are no longer in the category of someone who never received the message. You have just received a more complete account of what Islam actually teaches about your situation than most people ever hear. What you do with that is entirely yours to decide. That is what the texts say.